The Tao of Self-Confidence, Episode 928. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. Visit our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits. If you're tired of being the best-kept secret in your industry, listen up. You don't need to be louder, you need to be seen. Grab my free Visible Framework Toolkit, the exact steps I use to go from overlooked to being the go-to expert people turn to for impact and insight. Download it now at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Well, hello friend, welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. I'm your host today, Sheena Yap Chan, and today I have an amazing lady on the show today. She is the Vice President and Deputy Publisher of HarperCollins, so I'm super excited to have her on and share her story. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Tara Parsons. Hey Tara, how are you today? Maybe you can fill in a little bit more about yourself to the listeners.
Thank you so much, Sheena. Yes, I'm Tara Parsons. I'm the Vice President and Deputy Publisher of 3 different imprints at HarperCollins. One of them is Amistad, which publishes books by and for the Black diaspora. One of them is HarperCollins Español, which publishes books in Spanish. And HarperVia, which I helped launch with our president in 2019 and publishes international fiction, so books from all around the world. At HarperVia, I get to acquire and edit and publish many books from Asia. And as a Japanese American, this is a real passion for me.
I love that. Well, first off, thank you so much for just being in the space. You know, the number of Asian people in publishing, let alone Asian women in publishing, is very small. And just being able to see someone like you pave the way, be in the high positions in HarperCollins, I think it's amazing. And just knowing that you've paved the way, it shows us what's possible, and, you know, just opens the doors for so many other things. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for publishing your books.
Yeah, it's been so wild to see not one but 2 books with Wiley, so I'm just really grateful being able to have a book out there to help women, especially Asian women, with their confidence, because it's so important. So yeah, thank you also. And Tara, what'd be your favorite self-confidence quote?
You know, this was such a great prompt because I started thinking about all of the quotes that are so meaningful to me. And this one really stuck out to me. So Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist Zen master and peace activist, wrote, "To be beautiful means to be yourself. You don't need to be accepted by others. You need to accept yourself." And I think that's such a great quote about being confident in who you are, knowing who you are and what you bring to the table, and believing that that is valuable.
I love that quote, and it's just such a great reminder that who we truly are is what makes us beautiful. I know it could be easier said than done, especially growing up in Asian culture. I know in Japanese culture, it's very strict as well. And when we learn to just bring our beautiful self out, it just makes it a lot better. And I know that sounds cheesy, but it is so true. The people who you are drawn to the most are the ones who are very real and vulnerable and authentic, and you can tell that, you know, they're out there just showing their bare self even when it's scary at times. So thanks for sharing that great quote. And in your own words, how do you define self-confidence?
Well, I think it is very much about that, right? It's about when you're able to know who you really are and like accept all of your vulnerabilities and treat them almost as strengths. To be able to know who you are, be confident of that, and bring that into a room visibly. I think that's a huge definition of self-confidence.
I really like the last line that you mentioned, bring it out visibly. We're not taught to be visible. We're taught to be in the background, never make any noise. And especially if you want to make a dent in the world, if you want to be an author, if you want to be an entrepreneur, it is really, or a leader, it really is important to be visible, to put yourself out there, right? You can't be a leader if you're hiding from the shadows. You can't be an impact if you keep hiding behind closed doors, behind those walls. And so I love that you mentioned that part, because I think it's so important. And I talk about visibility all the time because visibility is what really helps us be seen as experts, break barriers, change the way, you know, how history is written, especially since they mentioned that the that the earliest gender parity would be achieved would be in the year 2158. So I don't think any woman wants to wait for that. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. And Tara, what was your life like before your discovery of self-confidence?
I've always had, weirdly enough, a lot of self-confidence. And I think it's because I played music from a young age. I had a very typical, in one sense, Asian upbringing in that I played the violin and I played competitively. And so I was used to this concept of sort of working really hard at something and then you become great at it and then performing in front of people. And even, it's funny, as an adult, I started taking drum lessons and I noticed that when I played with intention, with purpose, even if I didn't know what I was doing, I would come to a better result. Like I couldn't really learn to play if I was sort of like softly playing or like hesitantly playing. You kind of had to attack. And I think that kind of physical expression of confidence affects your inner confidence in a way. But when I thought about this question, I thought a lot about the times that I haven't been you can't be self-confident all the time, right? There are times when your confidence is tested. And I think it relates back to exactly what you were saying about the visibility, right? When you walk into a room, because when I first became a manager, like a leader, an editorial director, I was fairly young. I was probably about 30 years old. And, I looked much younger than that. And the person leaving the position, she was wonderful. And she's a person of her time, though. And she was telling me that I should probably try and look older or dress older. And I took that to mean I should sort of like suppress the parts of me that not only looked young but acted young. And I really became very serious and like I dressed like I was, 65 years old, had no fun with my clothing whatsoever. And it wasn't until I got really comfortable in that position that I started to express myself as I really am. And once I started doing that, the people around me could really feel that and saw me as a much more confident person. So it's interesting how your confidence can be tested like that and how the visibility of how authentically you're displaying your true personality, in many ways that can actually make you seem much more confident if you're being true to yourself.
I love that, and thanks for sharing that. I know sometimes as women we have to show up a certain way, especially in high position roles to be taken seriously. And especially being Asian, we have this some may call it a curse, some may call it, a something positive, but they say Asian don't raisin. And even when you said like 30, I'm talking to you right now. I'm like, you still look very young. So, that's the beauty part, I think, of being Asian. But yes, there is a part of you where you need to show up as your true self, or else people won't be able to see the magic that you have, the magic that you bring to the table. And, I was just curious, what made you decide to get into publishing? If you look at the numbers, like traditional publishing, 75% of traditional publishing is Caucasian, right? And part of the reasons why I never went after a traditional publisher to write a book was because I just didn't think like the numbers were so small. I was like, that's fine. Like it wasn't like something I needed to do. If the opportunity came along, then yes. But for you, I mean, you're under like three imprints of HarperCollins. HarperCollins is like one of the top five like mega publishers. Yeah, what was that aha moment that made you realize like you could do this, even if those odds were small?
Well, I think it was a combination of events, right? I didn't know that much about publishing until I started college and I was taking this creative writing class, and my teacher actually asked me to do a first edit of his manuscript, and he had just won a MacArthur Genius Award. And I thought, ooh, me? And I thought, oh, am I such a great writer? And he was like, well, no, but you're fantastic at giving the other kids in the class a help with their work. And I was like, oh, but I did that for him and I fell in love with it. And he helped connect me with an internship at Penguin at the time. And then it's just sort of been nonstop since. But when I did start, it was challenging. There were not many diverse people at all in publishing. Part of the reason why I'm such a big reader is because this pivotal moment, actually, I always was a reader, but there was a pivotal moment when I read this book called Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. And my mother had found an English translation of it, and she had the Japanese translation. And she said, I want you to read this book because I feel that you'll understand me better after you read it. And we had the most amazing conversation after I read that book. And that was part of where my passion for reading came from. And I thought, oh, I'll be able to do that in this position. But starting out in publishing was actually, you couldn't really just suddenly start doing books only by Asian authors, especially at a big five publisher. So I would balance it out. I could I could do here and there. I could publish books sort of the heart, and then at other times I was doing books that made sense for the group that I was in. So it was a build in order to be able to do the kind of books that now, thankfully, I get to do completely as part of my job, which is a real gift.
Thanks for sharing that. And I love that you mentioned, yes, you were put in this position, but yeah, you couldn't just be like, let's bring in all these Asian authors because we had to slowly kind of like plant the seed to say, oh, hey, kind of like Crazy Rich Asians, right? Like, oh, let's put this movie out and see what happens. Oh, it made $100 million in the box office. What other Asian stories can we bring now? Because sometimes we need to show that proof, like, yes, we have stories, we can be bankable, there's people out there who will read it. Then that little seed becomes a bigger seed, and then it just becomes a whole domino effect. I just want to say thank you so much for paving the way for so many Asian authors out there because it is a big deal, right? Like I mentioned, traditional publishing is still about 75% Caucasian. And to make a dent sometimes will take time. It doesn't happen overnight. It might take some years to kind of just even open a little door. And then as we take that step forward, it becomes bigger and really make that big impact. And because you were able to do that and realize what you're capable of, what's your life been like now?
Oh, well, I mean, it's such a gift to be able to work on these books. I know you can't see this on a podcast. I'm just holding up some new books for you so that and I'll describe them. But I published this author, Wan Pyung-son, and I've done two books with her now, Almond and Counterattacks at 30. And we just released this new miniature format. So like a normal book is maybe 6 by 9, and these are like little portable formats to make it really easy for people to take a book with them when they travel. If they want to take a minute out from their cell phone and just release their brain from that and immerse themselves in reading, they can. But the special thing about Wan Pyung-sun and about this book, Almond, in particular, is that it's about a 16-year-old boy who has alexithymia, which is a condition where he can't recognize emotions in other people's faces. And it's a crossover book. So young people read it and love it. Older people read it and love it. And so many people have read this book and come up to me and told me how influential it was in their lives and how they recommend it to other people. And not only has it introduced American authors, American readers, or people of all ilk to this Korean author, but it's also introduced some people to Korean culture. And I think that's incredible. And it feels amazing to be able to do that for somebody else. So for the young Tara who, had to convince people like, oh, we can publish more of these books. Now they're such commercial successes, and there's so many people who get to benefit from seeing themselves or seeing this culture up close, and they don't have to like struggle to find that book. It's just out there in all the bookstores, or you can get it anywhere online.
I love that. And, this is the reason why I also started a podcast because like 10 years ago, representation was still like next to none. And it was so important to highlight Asian women's stories because for so long we've been seen as quiet, submissive, obedient. And I really wanted to highlight us, women in publishing, like what you're doing, which is phenomenal work because we don't see that many Asian women in publishing, let alone in a high position in traditional publishing, working for a big five company. So thank you again. I know I keep saying it, but I really do appreciate it. And so many other people have, I'm sure, will be so appreciated that you've been able to start building little by little, bringing in Asian authors, and now having that opportunity to bring it without having to over explain why it's so needed in North America. And to the woman who's listening to your episode, she may be in her own journey of self-confidence. What would be that one tip you would give to her?
I think one of the tips that I would give to people is really know your stuff. If you know your stuff, Like I know everything, not everything, obviously. I learn something every single day, but I feel very confident walking into any room where I'm talking about publishing because I've done all the hard work. I know what I'm talking about. I've come prepared to every meeting. And that way, when something wild comes up, and maybe you have a question that you feel like, oh, foolish asking. You actually don't feel that foolish because you're like, you know what? I came super prepared. I know what I'm doing. If I don't know this question, then most people don't. If I don't know the answer to this question, then most people don't. And you can just own yourself and what you bring into the room. So I would say do your research, do all your hard work, and then recognize that you've done that work and let yourself be who you are in any meeting room anywhere.
Thanks for sharing that great advice. I do believe in preparation, which is key. It is why like K-pop groups like perform so well because they practice for like 2 years before they even debut, which is wild to even hear. But when you see how in sync they are with the dance moves and just like it's just amazing. And so I love that you mentioned that. And if our listeners wanted to learn more about you and what you do, is there any links or social media profiles we can connect with?
So I am on Instagram at editor_Tara, but the books, more importantly, that I represent are on Instagram. So you can follow them at HarperVia Books, Amistad Books, or Harper Español. And I want to give one more shout out. I'm on the board of an organization called Words Without Borders. And this is an organization that, helps translate works from around the world. And they even have an education part of the organization where you can get free course materials to teach these works. And it's all free. It's all available to the public. It's really just to make sure these international voices are heard around the world and open up people's eyes and perspectives to other points of view. So I just want to give all those a shout out.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And to our listeners, if you want to connect with Tara, you can also head on over to the taoofselfconfidence.com and search for Tara's name. Her show notes will pop up along with everything else that we talked about. And I just really want to thank Tara today for taking the time to share her story and tips and wisdom with us on self-confidence. So thank you again, Tara.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to be here with you.
Not a problem. It was such an honor having you on the show. And to our listeners, be on the lookout for another new episode of another amazing woman's journey to self-confidence, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now. You can now purchase The Tao of Self-Confidence, a guide to moving beyond trauma and awakening the leader within on Amazon, Barnes & Noble's, Walmart, Indigo, and other major book retailers. Get your copy today. Thank you for tuning in to another amazing episode of The Tao of Self-Confidence. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to get your daily boost of confidence.